What's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? Boogie2988 coming at you live once again through the power of the internet. And the topic du jour of the gaming industry right now is microtransactions, and it's for pretty good reason. If you look at the launch titles, specifically on the Xbox One, most of the games that you pay for off of the shelf include microtransactions. The two worst offenders certainly are Forza and Rise, and I want to talk about that today. I have a message for both consumers and developers. I hope you guys listen. I know it's just an opinion, and my opinion, just like everybody else's, can be disregarded, but I promise to try to stay fair and balanced and on point, and let's really look at this issue. And right off the bat, I want to establish that making and selling video games is a business like any other. And the point of any business is not just to create a good product, which should always be the first and foremost point of a business, but to create profit. And I understand the need and desire to make sure that the games that you guys are creating are profitable. You have to feed a lot of people. You have to pay advertising costs. You have to put butts in seats. You have to put coders in front of computers. You have to do a lot, and it costs a lot of money. Some games are in the millions for budget these days, and we get it. So let's look a little bit at the history of monetization of video games. When I was growing up, a video game is something you got on a cartridge, later on a disc, and it was generally complete. There was no easy way to download content. There was no easy way to add content. It was very difficult to patch software, so what you got on the disc is what you got. And not so far after that, people started releasing expansions. Of course, I remember when I was growing up, Blizzard was one of the people that was most famous for releasing expansions that added new content. For about half the price of the original game, you would get a nice big chunk of content. And believe it or not, there were people that were even resistant about expansions. People got mad that they released expansion. I can't believe they want another $20. I can't believe they want another $25. But expansions were never a bad deal. Maybe the way EverQuest handled them wasn't ideal. Maybe the way World of Warcraft handles them isn't ideal. But that's semantics. Soon after, DLC became a thing, downloadable content. And downloadable content is an easily abused system. Because think of them as little micro expansions. That's how we all thought of them. And originally, it was generally free stuff. And it would come along with the patches for the game. And that was great. But eventually, the Xbox 360 came along. And that's where it really got pushed to the forefront. Downloadable content as bonus pay for access to your game. But even that, if you treat it like a small expansion, adding more content to the game, that's great. We all love that. So please do more of that. You think of the new Last of Us DLC coming out. You think of the as short as it was, the BioShock Infinite DLC. These are great examples of downloadable content we're willing to pay for with a smile on our face. Best example of DLC ever, by the way, Borderlands 2. If you haven't checked out what Randy Pitchford and his team did, you really, really should. If all DLC was like that, with the exception of some of the cosmetic stuff, I would never complain about DLC again. So the next natural progression for monetization in gaming is microtransactions. And you can really blame the App Store for Apple for this entire process of creating free apps that have in-app purchases that allow you to have access to new stuff. Generally, in the App Store, it tends to be access to new levels or access to new game modes or things along that lines. But it makes sense because the purchases are either absurdly cheap to get the actual game to start, or often the game is free. And you'll even see this on PC, where the game is downloaded entirely for free. For example, League of Legends, which allows you to download cosmetic changes such as new skins, or even access to characters that you can get by playing the game, but you can get early access for the stuff. And for the most part, that's all okay because the games are free to play. Where I draw the line, and I think most of us draw the line, is when we're already paying a large entry price to access the game or the app to begin with. If we pay $60 on shelf price for a game, we do not want to see day one DLC. That's a part of the game that has been stripped out just so you can monetize it. We don't want to see in-app purchases being pushed at the front of the game when we've already spent $60. $60 is a lot of money. At minimum wage, after taxes, that's like 10 hours worth of work to get access to this game. We don't want to sit down and start spending spending more money 10 minutes after installing it onto our system. A lot of people seem to say, if you don't like it, don't buy it. And today, Phil Spencer said specifically that. He said they're in an experimental stage at Microsoft with microtransactions to see what consumers want and what they don't want. And if you are the kind of person that loves microtransactions and little bypasses and little cheats that keep you from having to grind in the game, you should pull out your credit card and buy a Lamborghini in Forza, and you should buy some multiplayer in Armor in Rise, and you should have a great time. That's the future you want. You should embrace it. Go for it. But I think the majority of us don't want that. And just like Phil Spencer said, we should not make those purchases. And they're going to collect that data. I'm going to recommend that we go even a step further, Phil, and I'm going to recommend people don't buy those games if they don't like microtransactions. Don't walk in, spend $60 to buy a game that's incomplete, because it makes me feel like shit when I load a game that I just paid retail for, and it tells me that there's extra content on the disc, bypass systems, cheats, new cars, new stuff that I can't access because I don't want to pull out my credit card. Microsoft says they have data gathering systems in place that will be able to gauge people's exception and reliance on these types of microtransactions. But I just want to go ahead and tell you right here, you can save all the money from collecting that data. I can tell you pretty much what I want and what my friends want, and I'm willing to bet everybody wants. We want you to create a complete and final, beautiful game. And we want you to charge us $60 for it, which is a lot of money to a lot of us. And we want to play that game and take it home, and we want to fall in love with it. We want it to be amazing and mind-blowing, so incredible and so good that we are willing to pull out our credit cards to get access to more. And then sell us a month later. Have your developers, after completing the game, create more content for that game. Maybe it's a new fighting character for your fighting game. Maybe it's a new multiplayer map for the multiplayer shooter that you've developed. Maybe it's a whole other story arc for the characters, for the story that we just fell in love with. And we will buy it, and we'll be glad we did. If you're hell-bent on microtransactions, at least have the decency to make the entry point price for your game either very low or close to zero as possible, or maybe even non-existent. Make it zero. Allow us to download your game and play it for free and fall in love with it. So that way when we pull our credit card, we feel like we're supporting a great game. We feel like we're supporting something magical and wonderful that the developers believed in so much they were willing to give it to us for free. And that's exactly how Tribes did it. Exactly how Hearthstone did it. Exactly how League of Legends have done it. And look at League of Legends. It's the #1 most played, watched game in the world. And they're making money hand over fist. But even the least cynical, richest person in the world has to know that if you take a disc home that you just spent retail price on, and it asks you to spend another $60 to bypass the game entirely, to gain access to the best car, that's a load of shit. And as a consumer, if you're watching this, it's once again time to vote with your dollar. We bought the expansions, so they kept making expansions. We bought the DLC, so they kept making DLC. If you really, really don't like microtransactions, have the decency not to buy the microtransactions. And if you can, don't buy the game that has them in them. Send a message. Do the right thing. Stand up for yourself.